keep Friday afternoons free. Clear them of piano lessons, Kumon, whatever, and try to get the rest of the parents in your neighborhood to do the same for their kids so that there is a gaggle, a Peanuts gang that can go outside and play.
Welcome to the Healthy Screen Habits Podcast. I'm Hillary Wilkinson. Whether you're starting your parenting journey with a newborn or looking to connect with your teen on technology, let's learn some new healthy screen habits together. So often I will forget to do something or have a parenting misstep that causes me to look around the room, throw up my hands, and announce Parent of the Year award right here, kids. If you work with kids, if you parent kids, or if you have basically any human interaction, you will have most likely felt that moment. Okay. And the difference between labeling ourselves versus being name called is huge. And my guest today is amazing. She transformed the way I viewed adolescence with my children. And yet in 2008 was granted the title / name called America's Worst Mom, following a column she wrote documenting her decision to allow her 9-year-old son to take the subway home by himself. I cannot wait to unpack this. Welcome to Healthy Screen Habits, Lenore Skenazy.
Well, thank you, Hillary. I'm happy to be, quote unquote, here in
Yes,
cyberspace with you.
exactly. The benefits of technology,
Yeah,
right?
really, this is great. Wow.
It's a
Kids
coast
should
to
do more of
coast.
this.
Exactly. So, Lenore, let's start with what I jokingly refer to as the article heard round the world. And this is that piece that I feel like, I mean, you had been a writer for years, you had a career, but it was the piece that really launched you into kind of zeitgeist, I think. And it gave you, like I said, the label I referred to earlier. Can you talk about what led up to it and what led you through that?
Yeah, sure. This is a long time ago already. We're talking 2008. Our younger son, named Izzy, started asking my husband and me if we would take him someplace he'd never been before here in New York City, where we live, and let him find his own way home on the subway, which I think is the suburban equivalent of like, will you take me to the library and let me ride my bike home or something like that. And so, husband, who's not called America's worst dad,
Of
and
course.
yeah, really, isn't that interesting? It's an omission. I'm sure they'll fix that. Um, Anyways, we talked about it. Does this make sense? Our older son hadn't asked us this. We hadn't thought about it before. But finally, we decided yes, because we're on the subways all the time. That's how we get around. We don't have a car. Yes, Izzy feels he's ready. And, we know him. We know our subways. We know our subway stops. I'll take him. So I took him up to Bloomingdale's, which is a fancy department store and a fancy zip code. And I left him there after telling him today was the day. And Bloomingdale's has its own subway stop, little known fact. And so all you had to do is go downstairs in Bloomingdale's and you're on the subway, basically. And so he took the subway down a few stops and then he emerged actually on 34th Street, also famous for another department store, Macy's. And then he took the bus across town and came into our apartment levitating with pride and sort of excitement and that feeling you get when you've done something and you can't wait to like, I did it. You feel proud and you're happy that your parents trusted you. And it's just an exciting mini milestone in life. And that's literally what it was. And I didn't even, though I had a column, a newspaper column back then, I didn't write about it at the time because it didn't strike me as a big deal. But a couple months later, when I had nothing to write about, I asked my editor, should I write about, is he taking the subway? And she said, sure. What are they going to say? You got to fill that page. And so I wrote why I let my 9-year-old ride the subway alone. And 2 days later, I was on the Today Show, MSNBC, Fox News, and NPR. And so that weekend, I started a blog that I called Free Range Kids because you don't always get to, direct the conversation the way you'd want when you're on TV. But when you got a blog, you get to say exactly what you want. And what I wanted to say is that I love safety. I love my sons. I want them to outlive me by decades and decades. And so I didn't do this heedlessly. and I don't not care about danger. And I do things that I think rationally make a lot of sense to keep my kids safe. Back then there were, they were in car seats and helmets and mouth guards, and I love seat belts. But I don't think that kids need us supervising them every single second of the day, especially when they're outside the home. I think it's become really, I mean, I found this out, right? That it's unusual to let your kids have any kind of old-fashioned independence in the real world now. And I think that's just not fair to them. It's not fair to us as parents to make sure that like every time we want our kids to be outside, we have to be out there with them. That is boring for them and boring for us, and also not even developmentally great for our kids.
It's interesting that you brought up, I think this is the suburban equivalent. I think for many people, many country mice out here who who don't identify with city mice, I think
Mhm.
that the thought of navigating subways on their own is frightening. So I do think there was probably that element. I think it's interesting that you bring that up because I'm like, oh, I can see how, I mean, the subway seems so
Daunting.
daunting is the perfect word, right?
Mhm.
It's just this maze and network and there are
It is,
tunnels and
right.
yes,
And
exact.
and the subways are, as the word sub suggests, subterranean, and that has a lot of connotations of its own. But
Yeah,
you really do have to think about it as something that was extraordinarily familiar to us. I mean, that's how we
for
got
sure.
anywhere, right?
Right. So what's the deal? Like why knowing that we've got parents that I mean it should be very normal for me to like I said in 2008 when your story came out, I was raising a toddler and an early elementary school age child, okay?
Hmm.
And within 2 years, I was being, I felt like your work helped me push my boundaries to tell my son, okay, like go ahead and take the dog for a walk, around the
Hmm.
block. It's not
Mm.
like it's this far
It,
off exotic
right.
land.
Not
And he
like the
had the
Pony
dog
Express,
with him.
right?
Exactly. But even still, I
Yeah.
had just this raising feeling of like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, where is he? Where is he? Okay. And so what's the deal? Like, why are parents more afraid, anxious, paranoid? Like, fill in the blank. Why are we this way?
Well, I wondered that myself, because I certainly was raised, I'm 64, so let's just get it out there. I was raised in the 60s and the 70s, and back then you would walk to school on your own, starting in kindergarten or first grade. And my mom, who was a nervous mom who quit her job to be a full-time stay-at-home mom, nonetheless didn't walk me or my sister, and we walked separately, we were old, different ages. And so how could it be that somebody who was devoting her life to raising the kids safely and happily in the suburbs, which I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, nonetheless would say goodbye and not see me, like literally not see me, not track me, not know how I was until 3:30 when I came home and had my snack and either went outside or went upstairs to read. The big thing is, I mean, I can tell us how we got here with, there's an explosion of media and we live in a litigious society and an expert culture. But what it really boils down to is, well, I have to go backwards for 1 second and say, whenever I was doing these interviews, about letting Izzy take the subway, often there was a pause, and then the interviewer would ask this question, supposedly reluctantly, but it didn't seem that reluctant to me. It seemed like they were coming in for the kill, and it was, but how would you have felt? He came home, it was great, but how would you have felt if he hadn't come home? And it took me a very long time to figure out what to say. I still haven't figured out exactly what he say. What do you say? Bad? Or
Yeah, right.
what, like disappointed? What are you supposed to say? Right? And it finally occurred to me that there's no good answer to that because it's not a question. Obviously, everyone who asked that question knows exactly how you'd feel if your child didn't come home. But what it really was implanting that storyline into a story that was one of ease, joy, and triumph. And they took that from him and from me and turned it into a story of near disaster. And wouldn't I have been the one who caused it? Shouldn't I be remorseful, even though it didn't happen? But what if it had? I mean, it's like you're supposed to go to this sort of hypothetical situation every time you let your kids do anything on their own. And the hypothetical situation is always the very worst case scenario. I was actually just trying to edit down a letter that a mom wrote to me. She'd heard Jonathan Haidt, who I work with, give a talk about the anxious generation, how phones and a lack of independence and a lack of free play are sort of changing childhood. And in his talk, Jonathan talks about Let Grow, which we co-founded, and the Let Grow experience, where kids get a homework assignment to go home and do something new on their own with their parents' permission, but without their parents. So one mom, Larissa, I'd never met her before, wrote to me and said, she heard this and she was so excited, and she remembered her own childhood and how much she wanted to be big. She wanted to use, her older sisters could peel an apple with one peel the whole way around using a knife. And she was like, I want to learn to do that. And as most of us recall, the desire to be big, the desire to be grown up, the desire to make it, be somebody in the world is a very normal drive in children. And it's good because it makes you do things that are a little scary or hard or risky. And so you grow up and you're not afraid of everything. Anyway, so she told her daughter, okay, look I listened to John. He's talking about the Let Grow experience. How about you do one? Maybe you could walk home the 10 blocks here in New York City with your friend. Her daughter's in 5th grade. And the daughter's first question was, can I bring mace? So she was thinking ahead, already sort of having absorbed that worst case scenario. So it feels like this new path from ordinary activity, whether cooking, I'm going to burn down the house, walking, I'm going to get lost, waiting at the bus stop, I'm going to get abducted. This, what I call worst first thinking, has become so habitual that it feels like it's instinct. So anyways, the girl, I have to tell you, this girl took her walk. I wonder, I don't have it right in front of me, but she wrote, so I said to the mom, can you have her write something for me? Because I'd like to hear it from the kid herself. And what the kid wrote was that the first time that it was like 2 weeks ago was the first time that she did it. She walked with her friend, and her friend was carefree because her friend had done this before. He's a boy. And she said, but me, I was looking in every van, every car, and I think she was looking for like, is somebody going to steal me? Is there some kidnapper there? And she couldn't relax the entire time, but they made it the 10 blocks, and that was that. And then she did it the next week, and she said, and what's weird is that I wasn't afraid anymore. I felt almost as carefree as my friend. And I'm thinking, I wish she'd speak into the mic. I guess I'm speaking into the mic for her, because I've seen this over and over and over and over and over again, which is that the first time you do something, it seems completely impossible, so scary, so many chances to screw up, so unlikely that you can do what others have done. You just feel inadequate, you feel anxious, and you do it, and it turns out to be surprisingly not that bad, even if something goes wrong. It's like, oh, I turned on the wrong block and then I had to go on the right one. I once had a wonderful story about a boy who took the bus the wrong direction, and then he had to get the transfer, and he got 2 transfers for some reason. He went in the right direction afterwards, and he kept the extra transfer in his wallet for the rest of the year, because getting on the wrong bus turned out not to be a disaster. It felt like it. He said he was about to cry on the bus, but he didn't, and he got on the right bus, and now he carries the transfer with him because it shows that I'm okay. I'm okay, even in the quote unquote worst case scenario, wrong bus, about to cry.
No, they call that exposure therapy, where stepping into hard things, for lack of a better word, or into things that you're very afraid of. You have kids that are very afraid to swim. You don't avoid water. You get them in the pool because it can save their life. The thing that I think comes through again and again, which is so interesting to note, is here we're supposed to be, raising children in our digital age. And, we've got all these little technical savants, and all of the suggestions from Let Grow are primarily offline living.
Oh, for sure. They're just real world experiences.
Yeah.
Just giving them back the world.
So because this is healthy screen habits, what role do you think tech is playing in this generalized anxiety land?
I think it's pretty big lately, and I concern myself less with the time that kids spend looking at their phones or devices. I work with Jonathan Haidt. That's his big thing. And my big thing is the time that we spend watching our kids via devices, because I feel like kids are being tracked so many ways, so much of the day that, the people we used to track, like 15 years ago, the only people we tracked was anybody who was a felon on work release,
Okay.
right? Because they had to go straight to work and then straight to home. And these ex-prisoners were happy to not be in prison, but they also knew that it wasn't complete freedom. And
Mhm.
so to pretend that we're giving our kids freedom when we're treating them the same way that we treat the felons on work release is sort of lying to ourselves. And it seems to me that if I had to live my childhood with my parents knowing I was a good kid, I mean, but still I had my independence. I could go to the library and spend a little time at the candy store. I could wander around in the woods for a while and not be pinpointed by satellite. And if I got a grade on my quiz, I brought it home or I didn't. But my parents wouldn't know about it at the exact same time as me, right?
Yeah.
And I walk through the door and hear, why did you get a B plus? I thought you studied so hard. I think you should study some more. That was not my life.
Right. And the implicit messaging that we're giving kids by doing all of the tracking is you can't handle it. So no wonder they don't have faith in themselves. No wonder they're anxious about trying new things because they're being hit with messages of every mass shooting, every,
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
and because of algorithmic push, and if they're on social media, they're being inundated with these scary messages. And then
Hmm.
we are unwittingly backing that call by saying, we need to be, we need to see you at all times. We need to, I mean, it's been called the world's longest umbilical cord. And, you shouldn't have that umbilical cord when you're 16. It's just, it's no longer needed. But yeah. So, I mean, clearly I am a Let Grow fan and follower, but I recognize I am not, it is not always the popular sentiment.
Well,
So,
it's not even a question of popularity. It's sort of what just becomes the norm. And then it's sort of hard to buck. I mean, especially the grade portals that schools do, which are sometimes also behavior portals.
right.
And you find out if your kid was, sitting quietly on the rug or rambunctious today, or he called out the answer without raising his hand. It's like living in a surveillance state.
Sure.
It seems, I mean, I've heard from students and from parents about sort of the tyranny of the portals. On one hand, you don't want your kid to fall behind. On the other hand, we used to have parent-teacher conferences once or twice a semester, and you get a report card. Do you really need to know homework assignment by homework assignment or in-class assignment by in-class assignment exactly how your kid is doing all the time? I mean, I sometimes feel like children still have the exoskeleton of a human, but inside it's just wires and supervision and cameras because we know so much about what they're doing every second of the day, even whether we're with them or not.
Kind of going off of that, let's also explore creativity a
Oh
little bit.
yeah, I'd love to
Because
talk.
when we talk to parents, there's often this underlying misconception of, I know they're safe if, say, they're on the couch, kind of a thing. And I think as the Surgeon General's messaging has come forward and other people have talked, we've certainly recognized that the internet is a place, not a thing. And that is complete misconception that your kid is safe if they are actually online on the couch.
Actually, that's a great
So,
expression. The internet is a place, not a thing. I haven't heard that. That's really cool.
so when we keep kids in this consumption mode, it can, I believe, staunch their creative process because they're continually consuming, and creativity requires an incubationary period. And quite frankly, that incubationary period often includes a little bit of boredom, right? For to just stop
I
and
think, I think
think
boredom
and
is a catalyst, but
mhm.
then it's not boring once you start thinking. I mean, we can't call that
No,
boredom too.
no.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't even know that boredom is actually the right time. That's why I like that term incubationary period. It's
Hmm.
just kind of more of like a sitting and staring zone.
If you're alone, and the incubation time with kids is arguing about the rules and what you're going to play.
Sure, sure,
Right? And that's
sure.
also a great time of, fomenting your social skills because wait a minute, they want to do it this way. If I suggest this, maybe I'll get buy-in. Oh no, they seem bored. All right, I'll compromise and I'll play it their way, but then tomorrow I'm going to bring, a
Right.
ball.
With which, if all of that is decided for you on an online format, none of that happens.
Correct.
But I would argue that creativity holds hands with hope, in that when we
Oh
talk
yeah, you
about
can change
anxiety,
things. Yeah,
yeah, you can change things, you can see a path forward, you can move things. If you remove hope, you have a very dark and dismal place indeed.
you
And
do.
so I think there's a link
Mm-hmm.
between a lack of creative space, be
Interesting.
it
Uh-huh.
mental space or physical space, but a lack of creativity in our current mental health crisis. And
That's
so,
yeah, yeah. Okay, that's interesting to think about creativity and hope as being linked because if you're creative enough, you can come up with something, or you have to come up
yes,
with a solution, right? So problem solving. So I do have one cool fact. And the thing that we like to remind people too is that, whatever the internet is doing or amplifying, the trends of giving kids less and less independence and more adult supervised and structured time has been going on for decades. And in those decades, I have to say, creativity has been falling. How do I know? There's a thing called the Torrance test of creativity. I think it's TORRANCE, but I could be wrong. If you look up Peter Gray, Gray, and test of creativity, it comes up because I'm always Googling this story, which is that there's been a test given to kids the same way for decades and decades. And it's really like you give them, I don't know, a paper clip and a paper towel and you say, make something out of it, and they do. And somehow that's judgeable and you can figure out where on the continuum how creative a kid is. And it sounds dumb, but if we've been doing it for years, it's sort of standardized. And what they found is that a kid who was average in the 80s is in the upper 15% now because the creativity has been going down. And so it's easier to look like a creative genius, even though you're not very creative anymore. And I'm sure that has to do with it was going down before the internet, and it has to do with when somebody else is deciding what you're going to do and how you're going to do it, whether that's the internet or the coach.
I was going to say being overscheduled. Yeah.
Right. Or the volumes of homework. And so instead of reading anything for fun or writing anything for fun, you're stuck, doing yet another homework assignment. There's just less time for your mind to do what you were calling before, whatever you called it, the fomenting time, the coming up with something to do, um, experience that is creativity.
Hmm.
So we really have to give kids back some unstructured, unsupervised time to both be out in the world and also to play. And
Mm-hmm.
so to play, the other Let Grow, so there's the Let Grow experience where kids get the homework assignment to do something new on their own with their parents' permission, but without their parents. And then we also recommend that schools do the Let Grow Play Club, which we maybe have to rename because everyone thinks, oh, play, that's nice. Downtime from learning. That'll get them revved up to learn again. It's like, I'm like, maybe we should call it the advanced leadership, creativity, and social emotional skills building. Maybe
There's got to
it's
be some fancy acronym there. Some
right. It's
that's
the
got to be.
entrepreneurship class after school. What do you do? Well, we get a ball and then we leave them alone. But it's to keep the schools open before or after school for mixed age, no devices, free play. Why mixed age? Well, because because until recently, the idea of segregating kids by age would have seemed weird. I have three kids. They must play separately because one is 5 and one is 9 and one is 13. It's like, no, they can play together and they can play with other kids. And when you have mixed ages together, that's how you start building empathy. I mean, why are kids like, why is empathy a problem? Well, because when you're a 7-year-old around other 7-year-olds, who's the toughest?
Yeah.
Who's the best ball player? But when you're a 7-year-old or when you're a 10-year-old, let's say, with a 5-year-old, there's no glory in striking out 5-year-old at bat. Duh, obviously you're better. You're twice their age. But there's some instinctual delight in throwing the ball very gently. And then the kid hits it like 5 inches and you go, whoa, it's a home run. Oh my God, look at Jesse's running to first. Come on, that's the way to first. Oh, he's running to first. No one can stop him. And we smile when we say this because we all know that feeling. And I've watched it and it's so fun. And the idea of taking that out of kids' lives to give them more chance to develop their skills that are appropriate to a 10-year-old is developing certain skills. It's developing, the ability to hit a ball, which you'll need when you're playing baseball, maybe for the rest of your life. But the skill of being kind, being clever, being creative, being empathic, being a good human being and of the yeah, I think you might use those even a little more than hitting the ball.
I was going to say all of the things that AI can't touch.
Right.
What you're
Right.
describing is the human experience.
Yes.
And what we
Yes.
are outsourcing is, a lot of people are concerned about our human experience being outsourced to AI. But
Yep.
all of the things that you're talking about, we can't get.
We can't,
From
I keep getting all these press releases from this thing that you probably heard of called Moxie.
Mhm.
It's a robot. It looks really cute. It looks like it was designed by Disney, big eyes. And it's supposed to teach your kids social emotional skills. It's like, huh? I mean, I bet it can teach a kid to say, I'm sorry, maybe that, but it can't teach a kid to be, creative and throw the ball gently because the little brother is there.
We have to take a break, but when we come back, I'm going to ask Lenore Skenazy for her healthy screen habit. Looking for a phone that provides entry-level protection and grows with your child as they age? Healthy Screen Habits has done the legwork for you. TrueMe is the phone you're looking for. Featuring KidSmart OS, different isn't really the right word. Think revolutionary. Your kids can graduate seamlessly from one level of responsibility to the next based on their needs and maturity. TrueMe, spelled TROOMI, is leading the way on devices built for the growing needs of families. Get all of this and an added discount when you use the code HSHabits at checkout. We're back. I'm talking with Lenore Skenazy, who says our kids are smarter, safer, and stronger than our culture gives them credit for. She lives in New York City with her husband and beloved computer.
What
And
can I say?
for the record, she used to write for Mad Magazine, which is a fun little side note. So, Lenore, on every episode of the Healthy Screen Habits podcast, I ask each guest for a healthy screen habit. And this is going to be a tip or takeaway that our listeners can put into practice in their own home. Do you have one?
I better, right? Otherwise, this will never air. Yeah, here's the easiest one. The whole problem with after school time is that kids are so scheduled that the chances that they will run around outside frolicking like the kids on Stranger Things, but without the monsters, kind of kind of rare. So it's free. Clear them of piano lessons, Kumon, whatever, and try to get the rest of the parents in your neighborhood to do the same for their kids so that there is a gaggle, a Peanuts gang that can go outside and play. And if you're afraid that the kids are playing outside, take turns sitting outside. You can scroll through your emails, right? They're not on their phones, but you can be on yours. And the other parents will know that there's some adult around and the kids can just play because, as we were discussing before, this mixed age, free form, practically unsupervised play is what kids were built to do, and giving it back will result in I can't guarantee it, but I think it'll make a much happier, more creative, calmer, and delighted to be alive kid.
I agree. And just with the caveat that with those Friday afternoon playtimes, keep them screen free. Keep them, yeah, just
Outside, yeah.
announce to friends that these are device free times. And I think you will be very popular person also, because most parents are wanting their kids to be outside doing the things that they remember loving. So, as always, you can find a complete transcript of this show by going to healthyscreenhabits.org, click the podcast button, and scroll down to find this episode. Lenore, thank you so much for taking the time to be here and for advocating for all of our kids and parents and everyone who is looking to grow.
Oh, well, my pleasure. Nothing like advocating for everyone, right?
For more information, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at Healthy Screen Habits. Make sure to visit our website, healthyscreenhabits.org, where you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or via RSS, so you'll never miss an episode. It's free, it's fun, and you get a healthy new screen habit each week. While you're at it, if you found value in this show, we'd appreciate you giving us a quick rating. It really does help other people find us and spread the word of healthy screen habits. Or if you'd simply like to tell a friend, we'd love that too. I so appreciate you spending your time with me this week, and I look forward to learning more healthy habits together.